you start by cutting a piece of fabric on the bias.
これは1センチ。
And that's a 1 centimeter wide piece of fabric.
3ミリの縫い線。
And the seam allowance is 3 millimeters. It's about 1/16.
ちょっと今方向だけなので、この生地に。はい。
And since this is an example, she's using the lighter color fabric so you can see.
で、ちょっと線何もないので。
And she doesn't have any lines drawn yet, so she's going to go ahead and draw this on the fabric, and she's doing a slight curve. And that is the exact size of the vine that she wants to put on there.
そしてこのカーブの内側の方のカーブに。
So she's first going to do the sewing on the lower inner concave part of the vine. She'll cut off the end so you can see. So she will match the line, the 1/16 of an inch seam allowance line on the stem piece with the 1/16 line, the bottom one, the convex one, or concave one on the bottom, and she will pin all the way along. Because the work is so fine, you really need to pin quite often. So on this one, she doesn't need to use these tiny applique pins. She could use longer pins. And she often cuts the stem piece of fabric longer than is needed so that she can do the work and then come back and get a perfect end. It's on her right hand, halfway down between her knuckles on her third finger. And she uses the leather one. Or she will use one that looks like this, but it's basically a whole thimble. Either one is fine. So she's going to start at the end and she'll be doing a double back stitch. Again, using a red thread so you can see the contrast. But normally she would use a disappearing thread that's the same color. And then she uses that with her knuckle area. And she holds the fabric and she does a running stitch. Tiny little stitches. All the way along that line that she has pinned with a rocking motion. She'll go all the way along the stem to the very end, continuing to use her leather thimble to push the needle through. Then when she gets to the end, she'll pull all the fabric out, pull the thread through, make it nice and even, and she has tiny, tiny, tiny little stitches. And then she'll do a double back stitch again to finish off and secure the thread. Then she'll use her ring cutter on her thumb to cut the thread. And then she'll take that, fold it up, use the rolling presser to roll that down nice and firm. She'll reknot the thread. And on this one, she will fold it under, needle turn, underneath the seam allowance. And then she'll bring the knot up from the back. And again, begin to stitch up, coming right on the fold as she moves along. So, like the applique example, she will go down, come right up next to the thread that was there, and make sure that the needle comes through right on the fold so that those stitches disappear into the applique.
もっと細く作りたいときは、さっきの1センチでは今度、太すぎるので、もう少し今、まあこれはこのままずっと待ってて、もっと細く作りたいときはちょっとこうカットします。
So the one she did started with was a 1 centimeter piece of fabric. If she wanted to go even narrower than that for the stem, she would trim off the seam allowance that is there.
そしてさっきはただこう折っただけなんですけど、これをねこう折ります。 このように。
はい、ぐっしりと。
はい。
So if you want to go even narrower than that, once you trim off the seam allowance a little bit, instead of just folding along the prior seam allowance, you actually push the seam allowance in underneath and double it, and then make it very, very thin. Hold it with your thumb, and then do the same.
そうすると縫い代はちゃんとこうダブルでこう折れているからあるんですけど、細く作っていくことができます。
Right, and this is how you do a very, very fine 1/16 centimeter or inch stem, where the seam allowance will double over itself while you hold it with your thumb, and then you go along and you applique in the same way where the needle and thread come up on the fold.
でこの作業をするときには針が柔らかいとこうちょっと加減してしまうので硬い針がいいんですね。
So when you do this and you use an applique needle, you want to make sure that you're using a needle that does not have a lot of bend in it. You want a harder metal for this because you do need to use the needle to push that in. So you can see the difference that the beginning part of it is about 3/8 of an inch, and this part is about 1/16 of an inch.
でそのためには私が使っている針はブラック針。
はい。So the ones that she likes to use for this 硬い方ですか？ So the ones that she uses clover, black.
ちょっと待って。これアプリケじゃないね。アプリケの12。
アプリケのこれですね。これ9ですね。
これの12がいいですね。
12がいいですか？はい。So we'll show you this, but it's actually a 12. So she likes to use the clover, black gold needles, the applique ones that are number 12. Those are the best ones for pushing this under. And they're nice and hard, and so you can actually use them to push the fabric under. And then that's how it finishes off. Then she pushes the needle through to the back, wraps it 3 times, pulls it through to make a knot, and cuts it off with her ring cutter. And you can see the tiny little stitches on the back.